Hello, listeners, and welcome back to the Dear Forest podcast. In this second episode, you will hear a conversation that I had with Marion Meyvis, who is the head of sustainable sourcing and product marketing at Oxfam Fair Trade. We had a very interesting conversation, and just a disclaimer ahead of time, we had the interview at a special location, so you might hear a bit more background noise than what you're expecting. So I'd like to invite you to cringe when you hear it, and then forgive me in the next second because I really did try. So our conversation was about the food industry and deforestation, and we spoke a little bit about some of the products that we heard about in the first episode. And I'd also like to take a moment to remind you to have a look at the show notes because I've added a few interesting links and some special terms that we used during the show are also explained there. Thank you for joining us on today's show. All right, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us on the Dear Forest podcast. So can you start by telling us your name, where you work, and what you do for work?
First of all, thanks for having me. I'm Marion Meyvis. I'm head of sustainable sourcing at Oxfam Fair Trade, which is a part of Oxfam Belgium.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. So let's just start from the beginning. So the podcast is about deforestation, and today we'll be discussing the food industry. So what products do you know have an impact on deforestation?
Maybe I explain it just a bit more about what Oxfam Fair Trade does. It's actually a pioneering food brand since 1971, where we market different food products that we mainly source in the global south, like coffee, cocoa or chocolates, wine and other food products. Both commodities that I was talking about, like coffee and cocoa, are deeply intertwined actually with deforestation, especially in the tropical regions where rainforests are often cleared to make way for plantations. So they have a big impact, I might say.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing a bit about the company in general. And can you delve into this relationship that the coffee and cocoa industry have with deforestation?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest issues with these industries is the boom and bust cycle, which means that actually these products are on the commodity market.
And for the listeners that don't know, the stock market is where you can buy and sell stocks. So for the most part, people would think of stocks of like big companies. So your S&P 500, so the top 500 companies traded in the stock market at the moment. It's just not to go too deeply into it, but just so you have an idea. So the idea is that it's more for companies, or at least in my head, it was more really just companies. And I didn't know that commodities were also included. So
yes, they are. And when prices are high, there's a surge in deforestation. So farmers expand plantation to capitalize on profitability. So they're really going to deforest more land when prices are high, so they can get more income from the work that they're doing.
Okay.
But this leads mainly to overproduction, which then turns out that prices drop, which means that, it's not so interesting anymore to cultivate cocoa or coffee.
Yeah.
And then, many farmers reduce investments in their plantations, leading into declining yields.
And before we go further on, when you say prices will increase, do you mean the price of the commodity or the price of the products?
The price of the commodity, but like for coffee it's like green coffee, and for chocolate it's cocoa.
So the raw product,
the raw materials. But of course this impacts the price of the end product, the coffee and the coke and the chocolate we find in the supermarkets.
And how would that happen? Like, why would the prices suddenly increase and become like more lucrative?
There's many reasons for that. Like now, for example, coffee and chocolates or cocoa have never seen high prices. And we see different factors that impact this. For example, climate change. We see that a lot of harvests in cocoa and coffee now fail because of climate change, because we have droughts when we need rain, or we have rain when we need a drier period. So this all impacts the production. So, and if there's less production, the prices will rise. So climate change is one of the factors that impacts the high prices at the moment. Mm-hmm. But one of the important factors as well is speculation. So cocoa and coffee, both of these commodities are on the stock market. So we have a lot of people speculating on the rise or the drop of these prices, which impacts actually income of farmers. They do not even buy, for example, these raw materials, so it very much impacts it. Okay. And also we have the demand of these products slightly rises as well as new upcoming economies consume more coffee or chocolate. So these three things impact prices at the moment. Yeah,
I think it's interesting about the stock market. I think in theory I knew that the stock market would have an impact, but I didn't know that they were really listed on the stock market as that is a little bit scary.
It is. And there's now actually raising some discussions to decommodify cocoa or coffee, because it's being so dependent on speculation, which has nothing to do with a farmer and their income, and it's two worlds apart, but you're playing actually with the income of farmers, which is
of course
not such an honest or fair practice.
Not at all. And it's also a natural resource as well. It's free, technically it grows out of the ground.
True.
So I think the idea of people profiting off of something that really just grows out of the ground the way that it is a bit strange to me, but that's definitely something interesting. So are there any other food products, so outside of coffee and cocoa, that also drive deforestation but that are brought up less in discourse?
I think soy, palm oil, I think most people, if we think about food products, I think that most people know the case of palm oil the best, because we had a campaign some years ago about palm oil and monkeys or orang-utans in the forests, and how they lose their forests because of deforestations to make palm oil plantations. So I think that product is very much linked to deforestation as well, but mainly in Indonesia and Malaysia. And what I find very particular in this discussion also for palm oil is that people think, okay, they saw the campaign of deforesting and the orang-utang and linked to palm oil, but I know from my work some other stories of palm oil, and actually it's in most of the cases it's the best oil you can use to fry crisps and this and that. It's you also need less trees to have a good production compared to coconut oil, for example. So but the examples we have from Indonesia and Malaysia and deforestation and the plantation system is actually not the way I see it as a good production, but I know some other smaller companies having more sustainable practices to cultivate palm oil, and then everyone thinks now that palm oil is very bad, the cultivating of palm oil is very bad, but I want to advocate as well for other means or other practices to cultivate palm oil, but of course we're not pro what is happening with deforestation and palm oil in Indonesia and Malaysia, but in Latin America or in West Africa I sometimes see other practices.
Just what food products are used with palm oil? So you mentioned
palm
crisps
oil,
but
to fry crisps, but also in hazelnut paste, choco pasta, as we know it. It's
yes. Belgian favorites.
Yes. It's in cookies. It's actually in a lot of products. If you read the ingredient lists, you will definitely see palm oil indicated a lot of times. So in sweet products and fried products, it's used in a lot of processed food actually.
Yeah. Okay.
And if I may delve into a bit in the cocoa and deforestation a bit more, because actually Belgium, and I don't know, but I think we're talking also for the Belgian public, hopefully more, but it's one of our people that we want to reach. It's actually an interesting case study, because cocoa is the third cause of deforestation linked to the country's economy. Belgium, we know, all of us know Belgian chocolates.
Indeed,
it's a very interesting and Belgian product, but it's most of the cocoa comes from West Africa, particularly Ivory Coast and Ghana, where vast forests have been lost to cocoa farming over the past decades, and it's very much it's a big problem. And now with climate change and soil degradation making cultivation more difficult in these regions, cocoa production is shifting to countries like Liberia, for example, where forests are still intact.
And is Liberia close to Ivory Coast and Ghana, just for our listeners who maybe aren't so map savvy?
Yeah, it's in the same region. It's in West Africa also, and it's actually, but this is illustrating a broader pattern of extractivism, because
that's true.
You see that in Ivory Coast or Ghana, if you look at pictures from let's say 30 years ago, satellite pictures and pictures now, you see how much forest is deforested because for cocoa, for this commodity. And
there's live maps that you can look at where you can move the time frame, and you can kind of see the forest reduce and reduce. So it's something very interesting. When I first saw it, I was kind of that's a lot more than what you would imagine. And also because as a person, your world feels big, but it's so much bigger than what big looks like in your head as well. So I'll definitely add a link to the satellite maps in the comments, so that the listeners can have a look for themselves at what is being described here. And
it's also sometimes it's understandable. As a farmer, you don't have a secured income, and you need to prices are really high for cocoa, and you have to feed your children or send your children to school, and then sometimes it's the only option to deforest if there's no national law or European law or exporting law regarding deforestation. But we see now that these natural resources are exploited and until they are depleted, and the soil is not that good anymore
and then
to
you
farm on.
Can't really grow anything other than at some point you can't grow anything other than those commodities, and then after the soil has degraded even further to the point where you can't even grow whatever commodity it was you were growing on the soil. And the soil, I think people also don't realize, is that the soil also needs a lot of time to reset, because there's lots of organisms and the bugs and stuff that live in the soil are the things that make the soil good to grow in. So if you've chopped it all down and taken away the trees that the bugs need to survive, then that entire ecosystem is destroyed. And for the soil to go back to where it was, it's going to take years and years for the trees to grow back, for the organisms that lived there to come back and become successful and then the process kind of, starts again. So I think, just while we're on the topic of farmers, can you maybe explain the difference between a smallhold farm and an industrial farm? Because there is a difference, and I think for most people, when they think of a farm, they really imagine a massive piece of land somewhere owned by some massive company, where you're like the plowing is done with like tractors and other massive equipment. But that really depends on your lens, because for me, when I think of a farm, I really think of something much smaller. I'm from Botswana, and we're a farming country, and so when I imagine a farm, I really imagine something much smaller, really for like a small family or something. So can you maybe delve into the difference?
Yeah, actually you started to explain it already. Very good. So what we talk about with large farms, it's rather like industrial farms, which are highly mechanized, which often prioritize efficiency before profit before sustainability. And they produce high volumes, mainly also monocultures. So they put one crop on a big field. They also contribute to deforestation, biodiversity loss, and soil depletion. And they use like a lot of chemicals, pesticides. Also, I was in Costa Rica some years ago, where I past a big industrial farm from Dole for pineapples, and there were really like drones with chemicals flying over these industrial farms, so close to where indigenous communities lived, so as well that they can contaminate rivers and this and that. So that's actually how industrial farms work, like efficiency, not that much sustainability. Also, the ownership scheme is that they are mainly owned by big shareholder companies, and that farmers, they do not actually work with farmers, but with workers, sometimes in very challenging circumstances as well. Like we do not know always if they get like a minimum wage. So that's actually a bit the opposite of small-scale farming. For example, Oxfam Fair Trade works with small-scale farmers, cooperatives mainly, where the ownership of the cooperative is with the farmers. So they are the one deciding about what do we do with our income, how do we share, for example, means that we buy together. So it's a total different way of working. And they are mainly run by families or communities. And also the how they manage or they cultivate their crops is very different from industrial farming. Like we see a lot of examples where they use more sustainable strategies, like agroforestry, for example. That means that they I try to explain that they integrate trees and crops next to each other. So they cultivate, for example, on one plot they cultivate coffee together with bananas, because like coffee needs also shadow trees, and so it's like more coexistence of different plants and different trees and different fruit trees as well, because it gives the soil also. You were talking about the impact on the soil of using different crops, so that's impacting it as well, and it's preserving biodiversity and improving the soil health in general. So these smallholder farmers try to really give an alternative to industrial farming, and I think in the long term, they're also going to be way stronger for sustainable cultivation, because with industrial farming, if you have like one monoculture that you're cultivating every year, your soil is degrading, and with different crops and with the management and with mulching and all kind of techniques to really keep the biodiversity or protect against climate change, we we do see now the small farmer groups we work with that are really using agroforestry or agroecological practices to manage their fields, that they are way more resilient against climate change.
Yeah.
Because if you mulch your fields, so if you put like all kind of trees and other organic products on your soil,
Yeah.
and you have heavy rainfalls, it protects also the soil to be
To not run
too
off.
wet.
So that
run,
there's
run
less
off.
runoff.
Yeah. But also the other way, if you have had some rain and then you have a long period of droughts, because of the mulching, you can like keep the soil a bit more wet or humid. So,
Yeah, but it sounds like it's more people intensive. So like you would have to work really hard to be taking care of your farm, and it doesn't sound like something that an industrial farm can afford, because if they're using machines all the time, then I think it would be very difficult to mulch using a machine and not harm the plants in some way. Because if I think, it would probably be a robot that would have to do it. And I can't think of a very elegant robot that can move out of the way very quickly.
I understand, but on the other hand, I'm always asking the question, do you still want to drink coffee or eat chocolate in 10, 15 or 20 years?
That's definitely a good thing to ask. And I think on that as well, what do the industrial farms do once the soil has degraded and they can't grow anything anymore? Because that was my first thought, like, okay, if you're not doing the work to protect your soil, eventually it'll be, you won't be able to grow anything on it successfully. So then what do they do? Because land is a massive investment, right? Like it costs a lot of money. And so what do they do?
Yeah, what we see now is that they search for other places to start again. Or as I told the example before of Ivory Coast, where there's so much deforestation and where the soil is actually in some parts, not everywhere, if you use sustainable agriculture practices like Oxfam does with the farmers we work with. And you have another story, but we see that if it's not like that, that big companies are looking for other countries to start this story again. And
then can they just sell then the land? Who do they sell it to? Because the soil is degraded, and farm areas in general aren't very accessible to big cities. So who is then buying this land? Or do they just keep it and wait it out? Like what?
Actually, in cocoa production, we always actually see the system from small farmers. So also the big companies buy from small farmers.
Yeah.
But because there's so much pressure on the industry, then they just go to another country to buy from other small farmers, and then this keeps on going. So what we are advocating with Oxfam is actually to have like long-term contracts with farmers, because I told you about the boom and bust cycle in the beginning of this conversation. And of course, if prices drop, farmers won't be interested anymore that much in really cultivating their land and investing in their land. So if they're not sure if the coming year the price will be higher or lower or still that low, why should they invest? Like, all the risk at the moment in the supply chain is at the farmer's level, because industry has the power to say, this year I'm going to buy from you, but if next year your soil is degraded, or you do not have that much yield, or you just cannot cultivate, I'm going to someone else. And that's actually something we stand for at Oxfam Fair Trade, is long-term relationships where we share the risks and the burden in the supply chain. So if we work with cooperatives, small-scale cooperatives, we really tell them, like, okay, we want a longer relationship with you, so you can invest in we also fund like investments in their fields. We bring knowledge about sustainable production. We help them with investing in for example different crops, shadow trees, and mulching or other techniques, so that they really see that investments bring more yields, and if they know that someone is going to buy from them also in the future, not only this time when there's
when things are good,
when things are good, then you give an incentive to farmers to do it differently. How would you be yourself if you do not know the next year if they're going to pay me at my job or not, if the prices will drop down? So that's actually the cycle we need to break, and Oxfam has different recipes to break this boom and bust cycle, or to see how
it really sounds like this is beautiful work that you're doing, like really giving them the security that they need to provide food to the global village, the global community. We all need food, and so we need them to be their best selves, so that things keep moving. So.
And this is actually, if I may add, it's also something that is in a more global discussion going on now. Like we see, I told you before that at the moment cocoa and coffee prices are on a level that is actually never seen before, and then we think, okay, how should we sustain the production in a sustainable way? Because to sustain it, we have to do it in a sustainable way, I think. Is through like more long contracts with farmers, like securing them, investing in more sustainable agricultural production methods, decommodifying, that's also something that's on the list, and sharing the risks and the burdens, because in the supply chain, risks is always on the shoulder of the farmers.
Which isn't fair. But so if there's somebody listening right now that is rightfully horrified at everything that they've heard today, what advice would you give them if they wanted to change their lifestyle and wanted to move towards really purchasing more sustainable, ethical, food and food products?
I think there's different mechanisms, because the first thing I would say is inform you about what do companies say about their sustainable sourcing practices. Do they tell about it? Are they talking about fair trade mechanisms? I'm not going to say that fair trade or external certification mechanisms do solve everything, but I see it as it's an external audit your farm or your commodity is having, or your organization is having. So and in fair trade, like the flow label, that there are minimum prices paid, and that you also pay
is fair trade, the fair trade label, if you can just explain that?
It's the Max Havelaar label. It's the one with blue with the guy
squiggle thing with the blue and the green on the side.
The Max Havelaar with the blue and the green, and the black like image.
So on the back of your food packaging, for those who don't know, on the back of your food packaging there should be a circle, and it'll say fair trade. It'll have a squiggle in the middle, and then a blue and a green color things. So that's the sign that we're talking about, just so that you know, and the next time you go to the grocery store you can have a look on the back of your food items.
And what other labels do not always do, but with the fair trade label, that they have standards for minimum prices in coffee and cocoa, and then you also, we as buyers, as sourcers, we always pay a premium. So we pay with the minimum pricing strategy. It actually works like this. So if the market price is under the minimum price, you as a buyer always pay the minimum price. If the market price is above the minimum price, you as a buyer pay the market price. So it works like this. But on top of that, you also pay a premium in this certification scheme. So you pay per metric ton, you also pay an extra for the cooperative to invest in social or ecological projects of the cooperative or the company where you buy from. For example, in training regarding sustainable agricultural strategies, and or projects to for women empowerment of the cooperatives. So it can be different kind of projects, but it's always like linked to social or ecological impacts. So I think external certification or looking at certification mechanism is one thing. On the other hand, I would say also inform you regarding connection between the company and the farmers, and then I'm maybe going to promote a bit the work we do, because we have as Oxfam Fair Trade, we have a direct relationship with all the trade partners we work with.
So there's no middlemen. So
no.
Just so that you can maybe understand as the listener. Normally the way that it works is there is a farmer at the beginning, very simple supply chain image here. There will be the farmer that is farming bananas, and then there will be a trader or something in the middle, somebody that buys the bananas from the farmer, and then this person will take these bananas and sell them to your local grocery store. So this is a very simplified version. In reality, there's a lot more players in the middle there, but just so that you have kind of an image of what we're talking about when we say there's kind of a direct relationship. So for most of your grocery stores, they have no idea who is bringing this food that they have put in front of you. They just have somebody that sells it to them, and that's who they deal with. So
that's indeed a very, very good explanation. And we're at Oxfam, for example, in our coffee supply chain, we work directly with the cooperatives from coffee farmers. So we actually know which farmers are behind your products, and there's like no middle traders or middlemen in between. So we know who farmed your coffee, for example, in the Oxfam Wereldswinkel. So that's another thing. I was talking before also about long-term contracts. So it's not, okay, we work with this trade partner and for next year we do not know if we're going to work with you, because if we see a better opportunity in another country, we are going to leave you behind. No, that's definitely not the strategy of Oxfam. We really want to work together for long-term relationships. And I think this is not clear enough for other products in the supermarket. Like, how do you engage yourself for long-term relationships, like partnerships, more partnerships with your farmers actually, because they are the ones making your food. Like, what do you promise to them? Do you go for a long-term partnership, or do you say to them, okay, if this year in Ivory Coast it won't work, I go to Liberia, or I go to Cameroon, or I go to another country? No, it's really giving also and engaging as a buyer also yourself. I always say in good and bad times. You engage yourself with your partner in good and bad times. And in bad times, you also have to see how we can solve the problem together, and not like run away from them. This is super important if you want a farmer to invest in his field. Okay, I think. And
can you maybe condense all of this into kind of a day-to-day what can a consumer do? So if I'm going to the grocery store and I'm like, I listened to this episode and I really want to make like better food choices, like what would you encourage the person to do other than being mindful? Because the fact that you're going to the store and thinking about it is already something so important. It's a big first step. So what else would you encourage the person to do, just like if they're going on their weekly grocery shop?
I would say for fruits and vegetables, like also check seasons, but there are of course fruits and vegetables that are not growing here, and I know that we want to keep on eating bananas or keep on eating avocados, so maybe check where they come from. Do they have a certification like a label, yes or no? So that I would like to check. But then I always say, like, buy locally is interesting, but on the other hand, coffee and cocoa until now they do not grow in our regions.
Yeah.
And we are going to keep on drinking coffee, and we're going to keep on eating chocolate, because we live in a globalized world. So I think for these products, so look at certification schemes, but also take your role as a consumer serious. Like, ask questions to these supermarkets, because we do know that supermarkets are very very vulnerable, or very much they do care about what their consumers say or what their consumers want. So they are willing to change if they get the feedback from their consumers to do it differently. So ask questions like, is your grapefruits coming from occupied territories in Palestine, for example? Like, is it where does it come from? Like, people want to know more and more, and you can see it also on the barcode, so you can check it. Yeah. So inform yourself, look for labels, and if you want to be very sure, go to an Oxfam World shop.
Okay, that also works pretty well. Yeah. So just like kind of on informing yourself, do you think that the average person, the average consumer, has enough information about the link between certain food products and deforestation? Like, what in your experience do you think that there's enough awareness? And
I don't think so. I see that there is a bit more awareness. I was talking about the palm oil campaign several years ago, so this changed something with the public, I think. But on the other hand, like, we're so far from production if we're in a supermarket. So like, you think sometimes, maybe I hear children say, these products, they grow in the supermarket. No, a potato comes from the ground, coffee comes from there. So there is not a lot of knowledge at the moment about where do my products come from. So I think education is super important from when children are like already a small age, to really educate them about where does your food come from, and that it doesn't grow in the supermarket. But then also, if you're an adult, you're not aware of the thing you explained before about how many middle parties are between like the farm and your end product in the supermarket. And I think we should be more aware of this as well, so you can keep on educating yourself as an adult as well. Like, direct trade is something that is actually used more and more in the sustainable from sustainable companies. But for me, direct trade is not the only thing. I think we have to talk about prices and about sharing risks and this and that.
And commodification.
Absolutely.
That is true. I think for me, when I was doing research about this episode, I found a biomarket that's really close to where I live. And they have big boards on the wall that basically tell you whether or not these vegetables are in season. So it's just to encourage people that are buying food there. So everything in this biomarket is it's just loose. So in most supermarkets, you get everything in like plastic packaging. And so I am trying to reduce the amount of plastic waste that I have this year. That's one of my New Year's resolutions. It's going quite well, actually, I will say.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But so they also have big boards where there's one for fruits and one for vegetables, and then there's like a tick on the months that it's in season. So you shouldn't be eating strawberries in January because they're not in season. So I also found that quite interesting.
Okay, maybe to add something on that, because it's super good that you were doing this. But if you have one day the possibility to visit a farm, like in your country, or if you're traveling, like, do so and ask farmers what their challenges are, because we're like Oxfam Fair Trade, we're focused mainly on farmers in the global south, but of course, like, farmers here in Belgium, they face the same problems. Like we had with potato harvest last year or 2 years ago, I do not remember, but this was a big disaster as well for farmers here. But like, they face the same problems. So if you have the chance to visit them, like, visit them, because if you know their story, you will change your mind in the supermarkets. I think it's like I was in the Amazon in Ecuador, like in January some weeks ago, and there we work with producers, with a cooperative cultivating yuca. It's like cassava, manioc, and plantains as well for the chips the crisps we sell at Oxfam Fair Trade, and they're like in the Amazon, so they're really using agroforestry production, and it's super beautiful to see. But as you said before, it takes a lot of time to cultivate, like that time and energy. But in the long run, you will have bigger yields, you will not have soil deprivation, you will have like way better production in the end. It's the same with organic farming. It's like you need like 3 years to change your field from a conventional field to an organic fields, and the first years probably you have lower yields. But in the long run, if you manage it well, depending a bit on the crops, your yields can be higher than when you were cultivating conventional. So it's
the long-term lens comes in. So definitely like more of a future forward facing kind of
absolutely. And the long run will only be like, farmers will only think in the long run if they have securities. It's like us, it's like everyone in their jobs.
That's true.
You will not buy a house if you have an interim job, for example. So it's the same. They're all thinking the same as we do, so
that's true. And just on the long-term perspective thing, if there's one thing that you hope somebody listening would take away from today's episode, what would it be?
I think we have to broaden a bit the discussion about deforestation. It's not only about trees, it's about ecosystems, it's about also about people, it's about communities, it's about economies and the future of our planet. So I think we should link deforestation way more to our consumer pattern. And I hope that could be an interesting message for today, to think about what you consume and try to do your research, educate yourself, but also ask to companies and be an activist, civilian or something.
A civil activist.
That's what I meant.
Okay, thank you. That's a great message, I think, to share, and I think we'll all keep that in mind, including me. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.